Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the stream. We are coming to you with breaking news. Multiple guilty verdicts have just been reached in the trial for the man charged in the murder of Chicago police officer Ella French.
Emonte Morgan now convicted of killing Officer French in 2021 and seriously injuring French's partner. Our Eric Kong was in the courtroom as this verdict was read. He joins us now from the courthouse with more. Eric.
Robin, Cheryl, moments ago, guilty verdicts on all counts. First-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and a second count of attempted first-degree murder against 23-year-old Emonte Morgan. This comes after 5 days of emotional testimony as well as evidence presented in this case. Closing arguments took place this afternoon as well. This all came after about 3.5 hours of deliberation by the jury of seven men as well as 5 women. Right now, we believe the family of Emonte Morgan is speaking right now. We're going to go to that right now.
Shot in the back of the head. 2 years ago, I told his defense she was shot in the back of the head. I was told I was delusional, that I was wrong. Well, turns out I was right. She was shot in the back of the head. And in the body-worn camera, it is impossible for Ella to have hit by the bullets from the vehicle that my son was in while he was being attacked by Carlos Yanez. It was impossible for him to be shot, given the positions of her and my son and Yanez. This is a cover-up, point blank, period. And I do believe that my son will receive justice. I will not stop. I will continue to fight for my son's justice. I will continue to advocate for people who have been victims of this corrupt judicial system. I will continue to advocate for those of lower socioeconomic statuses. We did not receive justice today. You guys, they serve somebody guilty that's actually innocent. And I am hurting right now, but I believe and I have full faith that my son will receive justice one day. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to say, but I believe, I know in my heart, and I know my grandson is innocent. And these police need to start being held accountable for their crookedness. Thank you. That's all I have.
That was the family of Emonte Morgan there. You heard from the mother of Emonte Morgan, Evelina Flores, professing her son's innocence as she has over the past week during the course of this trial, making the case that the defense attorneys have been making, which is that the body cam video that was presented to the jury, that it was inconclusive, according to the defense, saying that it did not actually show the moment when the shots were fired, or showed exactly what was happening during the course of that moment. And that was a pivotal moment, according to the defense, in terms of that very critical piece of evidence that may or may not have made the difference in this particular case. But again, to recap, guilty on first-degree murder for Emonte Morgan, guilty on attempted first-degree murder in connection with the wounding of Officer Carlos Yanez, and also guilty of attempted first-degree murder in connection with the firing upon of Joshua Blas, the third officer who was at that scene. All of this taking place on the 5th floor in a courtroom, a very dramatic moment as the jury was getting ready to deliver that verdict. No fewer than 12 sheriff's officers were in that courtroom, the judge admonishing the court members as well as members of the folks, the public, the officers also that had gathered inside the gallery, telling them that she was not going to tolerate any kind of outburst, just really underscoring the emotions of this particular trial, all of it coming to a head, as we just mentioned, just within the last 20 minutes or so. Those guilty verdicts, guilty essentially on all counts for 23-year-old Emonte Morgan. At this point, that first-degree murder conviction does make him eligible for life in prison, but that's going to be up to the judge in terms of the sentencing at this time. The defense has argued that Morgan was only 21 at the time of the commission of this crime, and that should actually play some sort of role in the sentencing, but we'll have to wait and see exactly how this plays out in terms of the sentencing. Back to you.
So Eric, set the scene for us when the verdicts were being read out loud in the courtroom. Let us know, how did the defendant react, and how was the family of Ella French reacting as well?
Yeah, again, a very dramatic moment. We were waiting for those verdicts to be read. The family of Emonte Morgan was seated directly behind me. The family of Ella French, Officer Ella French, her mother specifically, was seated to my left. There were a number of officers, CPD officers, in the courtroom as well. Pretty much every seat inside that courtroom was taken. Then the court members arrived. Emonte Morgan himself seated at the defense table. We heard those verdicts, guilty, guilty, guilty. There was no discernible reaction at all from Emonte Morgan as those guilty verdicts were read. Showed no emotion at all. At certain points, I looked over at Ella French's family. There was a section for her family as well as for the family of Carlos Yanez and Joshua Blas. Ella French's mom, I could see at one point, my view was partially obscured, but I could see her bowing her head, obviously in deep emotion. There were members in her particular section, one woman in particular sitting next to her, who appeared to be a family member who was weeping quietly. There were also some other people in the section for Carlos Yanez that were weeping very quietly as well. And so obviously a very emotional moment in that courtroom. Again, no discernible reaction from the defendant himself. The jury, they came in, they again deliberated about 3.5 hours. There was some question as to whether or not they would return tomorrow, but instead decided to continue late, past the usual sort of court ending time here at the Layton Criminal Courthouse to bring this case to a resolution after deliberating for a relatively short amount of time. Back to you.
It wasn't more than 3 hours or so. Eric, we saw some video there just a moment ago of Carlos Yanez, who still is visibly injured from being shot by Emonte Morgan. Ella French's mom has had a huge support group of current and former Chicago police officers. Tell me who you saw in court around her today, and that group expected to speak to us here, I would think, in the next few minutes.
Yeah, a number of officers, as I mentioned, from her particular, Ella French's particular police district gathered in the courtroom throughout the course of the trial. Ella French's mom has been here pretty much every day. Emonte Morgan, the defendant's mother and family, have been here pretty much every day as well for most of all the significant moments of the trial. And so Carlos Yanez, as well, as you mentioned, did testify during the course of this trial. He talked about the bullet that is still lodged in his neck that doctors have said is not safe yet to remove and may never be able to remove. At one point after the shooting, he was confined to a wheelchair. He now is able to walk, but he walked with a very visible limp. He also has a prosthetic eye and obviously other residual issues from being shot 5 times during the course of that particular encounter in August of 2021. Ella French's mom also testified, I believe, on the first or second day of this trial, very emotional testimony, talking about her daughter's love of being a police officer, and she spoke of the last conversation that they had before her daughter died, talking about that her daughter was on her way to work, decided to call her, often called her on her way to work. That was a special time for them to just sort of catch up, and recounted that conversation. So some very emotional testimony during the course of this trial, very graphic. As I mentioned, the body camera video also was the key piece of evidence perhaps in this case. Very graphic evidence that was presented, and at times you could see the jury actually reacting kind of emotionally to what they were viewing. There were certain aspects, including right after the shooting, where the officers, Yanez and French, were loaded into squad cars and raced off to a hospital as they were badly wounded or dying. And those were moments that certainly appeared to have resonated with this jury, touched the jury, and they were extremely emotional during the course of that testimony.
We know there was an overflow room because there was so much interest in this case. As you said, Officer Yanez testifying, he broke down and he talked about his memory and how his life has changed forever because of that night in August of 2021. And her mother, Elizabeth French, they walked in powerfully holding hands, and she said often every day she would talk to her daughter to and from work sometimes, and she would end the call by saying, "Be safe, take care, I love you." And that would be the last time she said she would say that to her daughter. Just moments ago, Eric, we saw Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx pass by you, but earlier in the evening we were told that there was a question by the jury and she was taken into the jury room. Do you know anything about that and what it pertained to?
We do not know what that question was. We surmise, Cheryl, that it did not necessarily have anything to do with the substance of the case, the evidence of the case. Otherwise, they would have presumably had to open up the courtroom to the public and to the court members to hear that question read in public. The fact that they did not, that it all took place behind closed doors between the judge and attorneys for both sides. The fact that it happened behind closed doors leads us to believe it maybe wasn't to the substance of the case, but maybe talking logistically about the fact that the jury wanted to stay late to bring this case to a resolution, and just asking perhaps the attorneys, just giving them a heads up that this could be a potentially late night. From my vantage point, it looks like the public defenders who were representing Emonte Morgan just walked past without any comment. You did hear the comment from Emonte Morgan's mother, Evelina Flores, defending her son, professing his innocence. She's been speaking throughout this case, but the attorneys, the defense attorneys, from what I just saw, leaving court right now without any comment.